In this video we will focus on color grading this image taken in Koh Lanta in Thailand. We will be focusing primarily on color because color is a very important factor when it comes to nature photography, when it comes to landscape photography. Simply saying, color can make or break your image. In case of this seascape, composition is spot on, everything is in place, however the color is just not interesting, it can be adjusted a lot, there is a lot of potential in this image. So if we zoom in a bit, we can see that we have a lot of these nice colors, but they are way too dull, they are just desaturated, and if we put a little bit of work, we'll get much more impactful image. So let's begin. I'm going to first examine the image for the typical issue, so let's just zoom in and take a look at the edge and around these branches, because typically you would have either chromatic aberration issues visible here or purple fringing. So here we are. So let's now move over to the lens tab, and you can see that chromatic aberration is already enabled, so this is not helping. Let's touch the purple fringing slider and let's push it towards the right. If I go all the way to the right, we can see that it helped. It didn't remove completely the purple fringing, we still have some of these artifacts visible here, but this is all we can do in case of this image. We can crop out maybe near the edges to get rid of these problematic areas if it will be needed in the end. So let's again see before and after correcting the purple fringing. Let's zoom out, and as a next step I just want to straighten out the horizon. So let's get our straighten tool and let's drag the line along. Okay, so something like this, and done. So we have straightened the image, we have corrected the purple fringing. As the very next step, I just want to perform on my background layer. Let's jump back to the exposure tab. On the background layer, I want to set the base contrast. So I'm going to use the levels tool and I'm going to go for the auto option. So let's click on the second icon, and that way I have set the base contrast. I might push the middle slider slightly towards the right to make those midtones a little bit darker, because we will be working a lot with curves in this image and we will adjust these tones. I just want to have these really nice rich darks. So as a next thing, let's recover some detail in the sky. If we enable the exposure warning, we can see that we have a lot of blown out highlights. Okay, so let's use now the HDR tool, the highlight slider, to recover some detail in the highlights. So the value around -18 already fixed the issue. So let's switch off the exposure warning. You can see that we are crashing a little bit of blacks here, but this doesn't bother me. I'm going to be adjusting the luminosity range with the curves. In case of this image, I'm going to take a little bit different approach. So typically when you are working on color in Capture One, you would be using either color balance tool or color editor. However, I want to show you that you can use as well curves when you are color grading in Capture One. This could be helpful for you, especially if you have a lot of experience when color grading images in Photoshop with curves. Okay, so let's begin the proper edit. I'm going to create a new layer, and on this layer I will be still adjusting the brightness and contrast with the HDR tool. So I'm going to create new field layer and I'm going to rename it. So let's just call it HDR, and here we will maybe for the beginning try to recover some shadows. So on the background layer I have already applied corrections to the highlights, but here I want to have just a separate layer, so when I will be color grading the image, when I will be working with curves, I can just very quickly switch it off and on and see the adjustments, how it works together. This wouldn't be possible in the background layer. I would have to just go here and either disable everything, just reset the tool. So having the HDR tool just on a separate layer is very, very helpful. So now on this layer, I'm going to target a little bit of shadows, and let's try to push shadows towards the right just to recover a little bit of detail in the dark parts in the image. So I don't want to overdo this. I think 35 is a little bit too much. Let's go down. The value around 32 is fine. So now I can see that the sky again got a little bit too flat in comparison with the rest. So I am going to again touch the highlight slider, but I will do this here on the separate layer. So let's move again towards the left and let's just darken the sky a little bit to balance the whole image, to balance the highlights with the midtones and shadows. Okay, so the value about negative, maybe a little bit less. Negative 27 is fine. Okay, we are ready now to start working with curves. So I'm going to create a new filled layer and let's just rename this layer to curves to keep things tidy and organized. And here on this very layer, I'm going to be adjusting contrast, I'm going to be adjusting luminosity levels, and I will color grade the image. So let's pull our curve tool out of the tools and let's maybe hide the tools. So this way we will have a little bit more space, we will have a little bit more room for this tool. We can even put it here. Okay, so on the RGB curve, I'm going to create a very subtle S-shaped curve to add a little bit more contrast to this image. So I'm going to start with adding the middle point, and I just want to brighten the midtones, those highlights in the darker part. So something like this, and I don't want to darken the shadows, they are already quite dark, but just to go a little bit lower here, and I will try to darken the sky to get a little bit of a matte effect. So I will drag this point a little bit downwards, just to have some, just to flatten the curve a little bit here. So the effect is very, very subtle. I don't want to go for anything dramatic here, and I can always readjust it later on. Let's now move over to the Luma curve. And here let's try with first adding the control point in the middle of the line, and let's just push it upwards, so that way we'll be brightening the image. I don't want to affect highlights, so I will add one more point here, and let's move with this one downwards. Something like this. So we'll have the sky a little bit more on a matte side without crushing these highlights. Something like that. Here. Okay, it looks good. So let's now move over to our red, green and blue curves, and on all of them I want to add a subtle S-shaped curve, and once this is done I will be readjusting them to manipulate with color. So let's begin with the curve in the red channel. If I create a control point and if I push it upwards, I will be adding red to the image. If I push it downwards, I will be adding cyan, because cyan is the complementary color to the red. So let's create this very subtle S-shaped curve. Here, let's just go a little bit upwards and push this point downwards, and in the shadows I will go with the control point a little bit downwards. Okay, let's repeat the same operation in the green channel. So something like this. This point, let's push a little bit downwards to mimic the shape of the curve in the red channel. And here one more control point to add some magenta to the shadows, because magenta is a complementary color to the green. Let's now move over to the blue channel and let's again repeat this operation. So here I go up, and by moving this point downwards I'm adding yellow to the highlights, and if I would go upwards I would add blue. So here let's move the control point downwards and let's warm up a little bit of these shadows. Okay, so we have created the basic S-shaped curves in all our 3 channels. Let's now readjust those curves. So starting with the red channel, I would like to warm up a little bit of the midtones here in the image. They are still a little bit too dull, they are grayish, so most of the data here in this image is in the midtone area, which is reflected here in the graph in our histogram. So I will be operating a lot in the middle part of the curve, and that way I will be influencing color in the midtones range. So let's maybe push the control point a little bit upwards, and that way you can see that I'm adding more red to the midtones. This is maybe a little bit too much, so let's go maybe somewhere around here, and let's flatten the curve so it won't be affecting the highlights, because I don't want to definitely have the red sky here. I don't want to have this greenish cast, so let's maybe zero the point. Let's move it to the position where it was at the very beginning, so let's just flatten the curve. So that way I have injected red into the midtones and I've made the sand a little bit warmer. So now to create a color contrast, let's add another control point and let's introduce some cyan to the shadows and to the darker midtones in the image. So we can push this point a little bit lower. And remember that if you want this super precision, you can always operate with arrows on your keyboard to move these points around. Okay, let's move over to the next channel, to the green channel. So here I will be operating either with the green or with the magenta. So when it comes to the midtones, let's maybe try to add some green as well. So I will be pushing the point upwards, and let's flatten the curve as well. Let's do the same as we have adjusted in the red. I have flattened the curve and I moved this point back to the input and output to 5,5. So let's do similar thing in the green channel, and let's maybe flatten the curve a little bit. And here I'm going to add one more control point and just make this shape a little bit deeper. Okay, let's now move over to the blue channel, and here let's reset this point as well. And here if I move control points upwards, I will be adding blue to the image. If I will move them downwards, I will be adding yellow. Okay, so let's try to inject a little bit of warmer yellow tones to the shadows. I'm going to create one more control point and push it downwards. As you can see, you can get really creative when working with curves. Okay, so that way you can play around with these control points, and in a super precise way you can affect color in your image. So let's maybe take a quick look at the before and after. So I'm going to get back my tools. So let's switch off our layer to see the before and after. So this is before, adjusting color with the curves, and this is after. So I have achieved this nice color contrast. Let's just put our tool back. I really wanted to get those yellows and blues more intense, because that way I'm working with complementary colors. So we can continue working that way. Now we will be introducing the color balance tool. So let's zoom out and let's create new layer. Let's just create new filled layer and maybe let's rename it to color balance. So as you can see, I'm mixing different tools, and in the end we'll readjust everything to get the best result. So here with the color balance tool, I have the possibility of injecting colors into particular luminosity ranges. So I can add color to the shadows, midtones or highlights. And if you would use master, you would add a color cast to the overall image. So let's move over to the shadow, and here in this range I would like to add a little bit a blue to the shadows, because right now if we zoom in and if I take a look at the color readouts here, if I hover over, we can see that this is just pure black. The numbers are almost equal. They are even on the warmer side. I have 5 for the red, 4 for the green and 4 for the blue. So let's just move over and add a little bit of blue to the shadows. So it got cooler significantly when I have done this. And I'm going to darken them a little bit as well here. So let's just pull that slider downwards. Let's now move over to the midtones range. And here I will add yellow. I want to warm up all the midtones in the image. The slider on the left hand side controls saturation. So I can go maybe around here, and I want to darken the midtones as well. Let's maybe zoom out, and if I go down I will make this color much stronger. So let's just see the before and after. So this is before and this is the after. Okay, so let's move over to highlights, and to create a color contrast I'm going to actually add a little bit of cyan to the highlights. Just a bit, not any crazy value, maybe something around here. Let's readjust the color, something here, and saturation at this level maybe is a little bit too much, something about here. And I'm going to darken the highlights range as well. So let's just touch this slider, and this affects a lot the sky. So this is before and this is the after. I just want to balance out the sky and the rest of the image. The day when I was taken, the image was quite foggy, quite dreamy. There was no strong shadows, there was no contrast in the light. So something like this represents the mood and the atmosphere quite well. Okay, so on this layer we've been working with the color balance tool. Let's now add to our mix color editor. So let's add new field layer. Okay, so now with the color editor I'm going to fine-tune selected colors in the image. So I will be targeting the blues, the yellows, the sky, the sand, and the greens. So let's move over to our color editor and let's go for the advanced tab. Let's maybe pull it out as well. Let's hide the tools, and here I'm going to be using the color picker to create my initial sample. So first let's maybe sample the blues. So I'm going to click around here in the cloud. Let's click on the second icon to go for the whole saturation range, and now I'm going to fine-tune the selected sample. I'm going to push my hue slider towards the left because I want to go from my warmer blue towards more cyanish color. So if we zoom in, if we focus here on the clouds and here on the rope, you can see that this is before and this is the after. So that's why I want to create this nice contrast between saturated cyans, those blues, and the yellow sand and these tones that we will target in a few seconds. So let's maybe go all the way to the left to make that color even more on the greenish side. When it comes to saturation, I'm not going to be making it more saturated because it's already quite strong, and let's maybe brighten the color to make it stand out more. Okay, 30 is too much. Something around 24 is fine. So this is the blue before and after the adjustment. Before I go further with colors, I want to readjust the sky. Let's get back to the tools. I'm going to jump back to the HDR layer and let's go to our HDR tool. So I want to correct the sky. This is way too bright. We are losing again the details here in the highlights. So I'm going to push further the highlight slider and maybe the white slider as well. So that way I can see that I got my detail back, but the color is now too strong. So now I can get back to readjusting it. So let's jump back to the color editor, and here I can actually go down with saturation. So the color won't be that prominent. This is too much. Something around -8, and maybe let's try with lightness. So this is too much. Let's zero out and let's start from here. Let's just push it a little bit to the right. So maybe lightness around 13. Okay, perfect. Let's sample next color. Now I'm going to focus on the sand. So let's get the picker and let's sample around here. Okay, let's make sure that we have the whole saturation range included. So let's click on the second icon. Okay, so let's now manipulate with the hue slider. Let's try to the right. So now this is making the sand more lemony. I want to make it warmer, so I will go to the left. And here I'm going to make it actually darker. So this is too much. Let's go around here and let's make it darker. I think it's a little bit too orangey, so let's just push it a little bit towards the middle, and let's now target the greens. So I'm going to sample somewhere around maybe here, and again let's click on the second icon just to make sure that the whole saturation range is included in my targeted color sample, and let's try to adjust the color. So let's see, if I go to the left I will be making it warmer. No, I want to get more color contrast, so I don't want definitely get it warmer. Actually, I don't want to touch it at all. Maybe something like this is fine. I'm very happy with the green as it is from the beginning. Let's now maybe make that green a little bit less prominent, so I'm going to push it slightly towards the left, something around -8, and let's maybe make it a little bit brighter, not much. A value around 11 is fine. Okay, let's maybe see the before and after. Let's get back to our tools. Let's put it back. So this is before and after fine-tuning color with the color editor. So again, before and after. So now I'm tempted to jump back to my curves. Let's just go to the curves layer and let's find the curves tool. I think I left it somewhere here. Okay, let's maybe create a new one, add tool, curves. And now I'm going to take it from here. Let's hide the tools and let's just see what else we can do with our curves. Okay, so with the RGB curve we have added a bit of contrast to the image. Let's maybe fine-tune it, so let's maybe add a little bit more light to the midtones range. Okay, so let's now move over to the Luma curve and let's see if we can fine-tune it. So let's try to push this point downwards. I think it's fine as it is. So let's just revisit our channels. Let's go to the red and let's look at the image. So I think I might want to darken a little bit the sky. This can be done maybe by injecting a little bit more of blue in the highlights. So let's go to the blue channel and let's push this point upwards. So that way I will be adding more blue in the highlights, but this way I'm affecting color. So let's go back to the green and let's manipulate with that point as well to keep the cyan shade that I have just created with the advanced color editor. Let's see if we could add more blue into these stones, because they are now on this neutral side. Let's just revisit the blue channel. Let's just make the tool a little bit smaller, so if I hover over the stone I can see the vertical line showing me more or less where that luminosity value lies. So if I push this point upwards I will be adding blue, but the same I will be removing yellow, so this is tricky. I prefer to keep the yellow in the sand rather than to add more blue to the stones. So let's maybe try to readjust this. Okay, let's hide the curves tool and let's jump back quickly to the color editor. And here I'm going to try to readjust the color of the stones. Okay, here it is. And let's just sample here in the stones. Let's just zoom in. So I want to change a little bit of this color. Okay, so here it is. Let's just include the whole saturation range. So let's first try to manipulate with saturation. So if we go for the positive values, something around 35, I already achieved the result that I wanted. So this is before and this is the after. I got this nice hint of blue in the color of these stones. This affected the sky as well, but it still looks good. So let's maybe try to affect the hue a bit. Let's maybe try to go for a little bit of a bluish color. Okay, something like this. And when it comes to lightness, I think we can just brighten the tone. Okay, so at this point, I'm very happy with the result I have achieved. Let's jump back to our layers, and as the very last layer, I would like to add overall clarity to the image. So let's add new field layer. Let's rename this layer to clarity. So let's add some clarity to the image. I'm going to go for quite a strong value. Okay, so this is adding this nice mid-tone contrast to the image, and let's maybe compare with punch. No, I think this is too aggressive and it is affecting colors, so the natural method creates this nice balanced effect. So if we zoom in, we can see, let's maybe take a look first at the stones and at the rope here. If we switch off or our layers, let's maybe go for medium size so we'll see all the layers. So if we switch off, this is the image before our color work, and gradually we were able, by building up these layers, first we have started with HDR, with recovering the highlight and shadow detail, and then we were working with curves on color grading with the color balance tool, and finally we were fine-tuning our colors with color editor. In the end, we have added clarity. So in Capture One, we are working in a non-destructive way, so at any point you can jump back to these particular layers and adjust these tools. You can adjust the colors or you can adjust saturation. Color grading, it's always a very subjective process and it is open process. So we can always get back to our browser and we can clone the variant and just work on a different version. So this one, if I would like to see the image with a little bit less saturation, so I can just jump back to my exposure tab and I can just push the saturation slider a little bit towards the left. Now I can compare these two images. So I hope you will find introducing the curves into your color grading workflow helpful, and I hope you will enjoy color grading your images in Capture One.